Well, good morning, church. Great to see each and every one of you here this morning for this great day. If you're a guest with us here today, we're incredibly grateful that you're here. Whether you came from online or you drove by, saw the sign, or however you got here, we're incredibly grateful that you're here at Anthem Church at this moment in our history. My name is Brad. I serve as lead pastor here at Anthem, and we're in a series right now called Life's Too Short, and we're talking about how to live the kind of life that we don't have regrets at the end of it. How many of you want to live a life without regret at the end, right? Every hand should be up. We want to live life without regret, not a perfect life where we did everything perfectly, because you and I are never going to be able to make that happen. But you know what? At the end of my days, when I'm 80, 90, 100, I want to look back on my life and not think, oh, I shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? That I should have gone for that thing that I felt like was in my heart. I should have had that conversation with that person that I felt like was on my heart. I should have done whatever God's purpose was for my life. I don't want to have a shoulda, coulda, woulda life, do you? Because that's the kind of life that's filled with regret. You know, when they survey people late in life, most of the regrets people have are not the mistakes they made or the small things that they did. It's the conversation that they didn't have, the risks they didn't take. Those end up, the chances to say I love you one last time before a loved one passes. Those are the regrets that are often in people's hearts. And so today in this series, we've been going through a couple conversations together as a church. The first is we talked about how life's too short to compare yourself. Isn't that true? Because comparison leads to competition and leads to discontentment. And ultimately, if you walk the road of discontentment, you end up in a place of destruction where your soul is ripped out of you, where you're chasing other people's lives and trying to be like other people. And so we said, life's too short to compare yourself. Isn't that true? Life's Too Short, our second week was to hold a grudge, and we took a backpack, and we talked about how every time I'm harmed or hurt, it's likely that I'm depositing that weight upon myself. When someone hurts me, I begin to try to carry all that weight, but we said this pain of carrying all these things, this weight is too heavy to bear for a lifetime. When I carry grudge upon grudge upon grudge and I try to just live life like it's normal, I'm going to have a hard time doing the things God calls me to do, loving the people God calls me to love, doing the things that are in front of me with love and compassion, to share love with other people when I'm carrying all that kind of burden on my back. The third week, last week, we talked about life's too short to play it safe. And life is too short to play it safe. When you take no risks, you play it safe all the time, you just can't walk into the future that God has prepared for you. It's going to take stepping out in faith and following God wherever He would lead you to go. Today, we're in week 4 of what's our 5-week series right now. And our topic today, so excited for what we're going to talk about here today. Thank you for being here on a fall break in the midst of people traveling, all those things. This message is really near and dear to my heart. Our topic today is life's too short to miss the moment. To miss the moment. If you have a Bible, you can turn with me to Numbers chapter 13, if you can find that. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. People are like, how many of you don't like numbers? The idea of numbers? You're not a numbers person. I'm not saying you don't like the Bible, but you don't like numbers. You know, Numbers is actually full of stories. It's not just like a bunch of numbers. And so Numbers is one of the fun books in the early part of the Old Testament. The story we're going to talk about today is so critical and it's defining for the people of Israel in their day and time, and even define them all the way up through present time. What I want to say at the outset before we read the passage here today is that sometimes one moment can change your entire life. That's true for me. I can think back to my life, several moments, meeting my wife, the birth of our first child, a number of other things. Some moments have the potential and the ability to change the whole course of your life. Isn't that true? You have those moments as well as I do. Things, places you were, that car crash you got in, that medical situation, that loss of a loved one, that job promotion, that thing you walked into and you didn't know where it was going to go, but it took you to places you never dreamed possible. One moment has the potential to change all of your entire life. The moment we're going to read today is just an incredibly defining moment for these people in this story, where they come up against a moment and they have a choice to make about what they're going to do about the moment that's in front of them. And most of them are going to miss the moment. And what we're going to talk about today is how not to be like them, okay? how to be different than them, to have a different heart, to have a different direction, a trajectory of our life where we say, you know what, we're not going to be people who stand on the sidelines, who sit on the fence, but we're going to be people who pursue God into the future that he's calling each and every one of us to walk in our lives. Numbers chapter 13, verse 1 begins to tell this story that we're talking about today, and it says, the Lord said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders. I just want to stop there for a second, and I just want to make sure we're clear about what God tells them to do. He says, go find some men and send them to do what? Explore the land. They're supposed to go look around and figure out what's there. I'm giving you the land. It's not really an issue of whether I'm going to give you the land or not. I'm giving you the land. So just go look around. Go see what I'm giving you, and then come back and give a report to all the people. Verse 17, when Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, go up through the Negev and into the hill country. See what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or is it bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. They will do that. It was a season for first ripe grapes. Verse 21. So they went up and they explored the land for 40 days. Verse 25. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. In fact, if you remember anybody in any churches or any Bible school young, you know the picture, there's like a pole between two guys carrying this big cluster of grapes, this big amount of fruit. So they sent them in and said, hey, go see if the land's any good. If there's any fruit in the land, will you bring some of it back to us? And they bring so much fruit that they go, this land is incredible. But it ends up being this thing that they latch onto, that the land is different than they've ever been to. It's big. Everything's big in the land, and they begin to feel very small for the moment that's in front of them. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But I always hate that in the middle of a story. Things are going so well till this moment. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified, and they're very large. We even saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live near the sea along the Jordan. Begin to list all these things, obstacles in their way. Then Caleb silenced the people. He was one of the 12 that went in before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size, and they began to overemphasize how big they are. They said, we saw the Nephilim there. They're sort of like giants of old. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim, it says. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. The story that we have on stage here today represents moments. Life is filled with moments where we have this opportunity where there's moments, doors are open and doors are closed, and there's moments and decisions have to be made, and every single moment, and this moment for Israel is a huge, momentous moment in their life, and everything's been leading to it. God brought them, maybe you know the story, out of Egypt. They were slaves for hundreds of years, slaves. No freedom, no future, no direction, no hopes for a better tomorrow, and they're stuck back in Egypt. And God says, look, those are my people. I love them. And he frees them from Egypt, and he pulls them out with his strong arm. Like maybe you know the story. He sends all these plagues on Egypt, and he sends all these frogs and flies and gnats, and there's all these plagues that happen, and the people finally go, look, we don't want any more of that. Just leave, right? That's the story. God delivers them out of Egypt, but they've never been free before, and they've never been in an army before. They've never had their own land before, and God says, you know what? I'm leading you from slavery into home ownership, basically. And you're going to own a lot of real estate. You're going to own a lot of land. Like, wow, this is so amazing. And they come up to this moment. Everything's been building towards it. And God says, look, here's the deal. I'm opening the door on this moment for you to go into the land that I promised you way back. Back to Abraham. Remember we talked about him last week? Hundreds of years before, maybe 300-400 years before Abram. Abram, leave your land and go to the place I'll tell you, and you're going to have descendants. He's like, Lord, I don't have any descendants. And one day they're going to own a lot of land. He's like, I mean, it sounds good. And he begins to walk, and they get stuck in Egypt, somewhat by God's will, and they get to this moment, and God says, everything's been building to this moment. He opens this door and says, now's the time. Let's go into the promised land. And he says, before you do, I just want you to know what a good God I am. I want you to get 12 people. I want you to get them together. I want you to go have them walk through this land. Go look around. See if it's everything that I told you would be. I told you it was a land flowing with milk and honey, where you can have your descendants upon descendants, all these good things in front of you. And they're like, okay, sounds like a great deal. They pull 12 people together, and they go into the land. And they begin to look around and see all the things, and the land is good. And it's incredible, and yet there are obstacles in the land. There are other people who like the land. They have lived there for a long time. They have their own cities, their own way of life. And they're not just going to let the Israelites come take it, and the Israelites get that in their head. You know what? I know God did all that, but I'm just not sure he's going to do it again, right? You ever felt that in your heart? Like, I know God saved me, rescued me, did this, provided for me in this way, but now I'm here, and maybe this is too much to ask of God, and yet God had been the one who opened the door from the very beginning. He said, it's time for you to walk through it. And here they are in this moment. The door's open, and they're looking around and begin to say, you know what? I don't know. I know the door's open, but I just don't know. You know, one thing I know about life all around us is that the promised land, if we look at this passage, the promised land is always on the other side of obedience. Your promised land, wherever God is leading you, whatever God has for you, whatever his plans and purposes are for your life, is always going to be a moment, and you're going to have to walk through them, and they're going to be on the other side of you walking by faith and not by sight only. Not just using your head, but using your spirit to allow the Spirit of God to lead you into the future. And so you're going to be at a moment in your life, and maybe you're in a moment right now. Or maybe you just came out of a moment, or maybe you're going to be in a moment tomorrow or next week. And God's going to say, I have all this for you, but you're going to have to make a decision to follow God through the moment. And on the other side of your obedience, you're going to eventually get to the promised land that's deep in your heart. Like maybe one day I'll be married. Maybe one day we'll be out of debt. Maybe one day we'll be able to give like we desire to give. Maybe one day I'm going to follow God like I dreamed possible. Maybe one day I'm going to do that thing that God put in my heart. I'm going to go accomplish whatever God's placed in my heart. Maybe one day I'll share my faith with my loved one. Maybe one day I'll actually get on my knees and pray the way that I actually dreamed possible that I would pray in my life. Maybe one day I'll get my Bible off the bookshelf and I'll read it in its entirety. Whatever that thing is in your life, you're saying maybe one day, maybe I'll get to the promised land. And here they are in the moment. The door is open. God has opened it. He's so good. He's so gracious. They have no right to own anything. They're slaves. God takes slaves and he takes them to the moment. He said, just follow me. Follow me through the moment. Cross over and obey me. I don't know what that thing is that's hidden in your heart. I know what they are in mine. I know I'll never get there unless I walk by faith. I just won't get there. I'll never get there unless I obey God and whatever God is calling me to do. If he says jump and I don't jump, I'm not going to fly, right? And this is their moment. And they come to the moment and they get here and they're like, wow, looks good. I mean, the grapes are ginormous. We have to carry them back on a pole between people. I've never seen grapes that big, but this is how big the grapes, between people, and they're so big, they're almost become like ominous to them. Like, whoa, I don't know. I don't know if we can do this. And they get to the moment and they stand and they look in and they get paralyzed by fear, don't they? What if it doesn't work out? What if God doesn't deliver us? I mean, I know that happened, but what if it doesn't happen again? You ever felt that way in your life? God could do something, but you're like, but this moment, and they get paralyzed by fear, and here they are in their moment. They're stuck in their moment, and they're looking in, and they're looking around, and they're thinking about it, and they're out there, they're looking around, and the spies come back who are just supposed to look at the land right away. By the way, not decide whether they can do it, but just look and explore. God doesn't say, hey, go figure out if it's possible. He says, I'm giving you the land. Just go see what it's like. And they go out there and they look around, and then they come back, they're like, it would be awesome, but I just don't think we can do it. And they get paralyzed in a moment. You know what I learned in life? It's that that delayed obedience is actually disobedience. Delayed obedience is actually disobedience. I think, well, I'm just delaying. God, maybe next week I'll do what you've called me to do. Maybe when my life gets together, I'll start doing the things that you have for me. Maybe once I finally have time, I'll start praying, right? Ever thought that in your heart? Maybe once I finally have money, I'll start giving. I know I've thought that in my heart. Maybe when things calm down, I'll do the next thing that you have in front of me. But what the scriptures say and what's going to happen in this story is they're going to delay their obedience. They're like, I don't know. Maybe we need a better plan. We got to think about it longer. Maybe we didn't understand God right. And they delay, and their delay in their obedience becomes disobedience for them. And the problem with delayed obedience and the problem with disobedience is little moments of restlessness and pushing back against God. Those little moments turn to weeks and months of pushing against God. And those weeks and months of pushing against God can turn to years of rebelling against God. And years of rebelling against God can cause you to miss the whole point of the reason you were created from the very beginning. You think, it's just a little moment, right? I mean, I could talk to them. I could share my faith. I could have that hard conversation. I can do the right thing in this situation, but it's just small. It's not really that big a deal, and yet it is a huge deal. Every moment, what we do with every moment. And here they think, it's not a big deal, right? Like, we need to stay alive, right? I mean, that's what they're thinking. We need to stay alive, right? Is this really the right thing? And they get frozen in the moment. They delay their obedience, and their delayed obedience becomes disobedience and rebellion against the God who created them, who rescued them, who called them all the way out of Egypt to give them a plan and a purpose here in the promised land of their life. I was thinking about this in my own life this week because there's a moment that was like this moment for me, and maybe you've had moments that are similar where you're like, I don't know, I think I should step out, but it feels too risky, it feels too uncertain, I don't have enough questions answered for me. When I was 15, God got a hold of my life, just changed my life. I don't know how to describe it. It's not describable because what happened for me is I changed. It's like I was walking, talking, living, going to church. I even know memory verses because I went to a private Christian school just to get a grade, all those kind of things, but I didn't know Jesus at all. I mean, that's the way that I feel about it now. It's like one day my eyes, my heart opened to the gospel. I began to hear things for the very first time, and God got a hold of me at 15. Okay, so fast forward to 17. Some of you have been around me, you know I'm a planner. I like to know every angle, and I like to plan things out. And so I began to plan. I thought, I'm going to go to college in a year and a half, so I need to start figuring out where I'm going to go to college. And so I began to research colleges and try to figure that out. And I went to a college fair, met some people, and I went home, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a list of colleges I might go to, and I'll send a letter. Like, this is like way back in the dark ages. I'll send a letter to those colleges, and I'll see if they'll send me something back in return to tell me about the college and see what it's like. And so I thought, I'll just pick a couple colleges, but I just got a little bit crazy about it, and I made a list of like 250 colleges to mail. This is legit. So I'm like typing all this in, all these addresses, sending all this letter, and I was sitting there one day in the office of our house growing up in Los Angeles, and I was typing all this out and figuring this out, and I know people hear God in different ways, and there's all those things to talk about, but the best I know, I heard God as clearly as I've almost ever heard him in my life. I've got 3 or 4 times like this in my entire life, and I was sitting there, not praying, mind you, not asking for his intervention, but he began to intervene in my list of 250 colleges. And he said, and I have it verbatim in my heart. I didn't hear it audibly, but I heard it in my heart like he spoke to me in words. And he said, you can keep doing what you're doing. This is what's written down I've had for all these years. You can keep doing what you're doing, but I know where you're going. That's what he said. And the best I remember what he said better than I remember what I said, but I think I said back, if you know where I'm going, I don't want to keep doing what I'm doing. And I felt like he gave me a picture that I was going to go to Oral Roberts University. Now, what's crazy about that step is I had never heard of Oral Roberts in my life, didn't know who he was, and I had never been to Oklahoma. God said, I think you're going to ORU. So I thought, okay, I never worked on it again. God is my witness. I never worked on that list ever again. I put it down. I threw it in the trash can at some point. Maybe not that moment, but soon after. My mom and I was like, well, if we're going to go to Oklahoma, you got to go visit the school that apparently you're going to. My family was like, I don't know what's happening. So we decided to go out to Tulsa and take this visit. By the way, we showed up in the first week in August or last week of July in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That was the worst decision we could have ever made because that created a number of events that made moving to Tulsa seem worse and worse and worse the longer we were here. So we showed up and we get there and we're looking around town, everything's fine, and we go to the visit that we had planned with this admissions person at ORU, and they begin to show us around. Within, I'm telling you, like the first 5 minutes of the visit, my mom stumbles on the staircase and almost breaks her ankle right there. We sit her on a bench. She doesn't go any further for almost the whole rest of the week that we're in Tulsa. That was just the beginning. He showed me around. We're seeing people as hot as can be, by the way. You had to wear shirts and ties at ORU during the era that I went there. They've now changed that. I don't know why God couldn't have changed that sooner, but so we showed up and I was like, well, I got to look like the park because they were basically offering me a full ride to go to ORU, and I got to look like the other students at ORU and all that kind of stuff. There was like nobody on campus, but I was wearing a shirt and tie and just sweating. Have you ever like worn too much clothes in the heat? Just sweating. I mean, like my whole body's sweating, walking around, and they're on the campus. And the main thing that started happening is like I didn't see any students, nobody my age. I was there at the wrong time. They set up the wrong time for me to visit. Nobody my age. And look, I was a teenage boy. I didn't see a single girl on campus the whole visit. I asked him, do women go to the school too? He's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of women. I was like, okay, I didn't see any. And he's like, I promise you. I'm like, I'll take your word for it. I'm hoping to meet one of them one day, all those kind of things. So, you gotta have priorities. So, so there I am, walking around, and so the visit just kind of kept going downhill from there. We went back to the hotel. Thunderstorms in Oklahoma. It was like, it's dark, thunder, lightning. I now love them, but at the moment I was like, that's a demonic attack. Thor, and I don't know what's happening. It's like I think God's telling me. Maybe God's telling me something. Maybe I'm not on the right track. Maybe I'm supposed to go back the way that I came from, right? Right back to Los Angeles, by the way. And so I didn't tell my mom at the moment because I thought if I told my mom that I was having second thoughts, she'd be like, oh, really? I can help you come up with a different plan than moving across the country. But I started having this second guessing. You ever second guess something that you felt confident about for a moment or you thought was the right thing? You start second guessing, even if it's something you felt like the Lord was leading you to or God was leading you to, and you start second guessing or negotiating with God. Anybody ever negotiated with God? I'm like, oh, but God, can I just not do that? I'll go to Africa for like 4 months. Whatever you need me to do. If I don't do that, I start negotiating all these things in my head. And I got on the plane ride going back, and I thought to myself, I don't know. I don't think I want to go. It was a long plane ride home. But I had decided in my heart that I was going to be a man of God. I just had decided. I didn't know how to, but I just decided that's the kind of man that I want to be. I want to be a godly man who does what God tells him to do. That's just the kind of person I want to be. And I was praying on the plane, God, tell me something else. If you speak to me again, then I'll do it. Give me a second sign, anything. It gave me nothing. And I said, okay, all I have to go on is I was in my room at home, 6 months ago, not praying, and you interrupted me, and I can't backtrack on it now. I decided before we landed the plane, I was like, I'm going to do what I believe God told me to do. It's never foolproof. You could give me stone tablets, would have helped, It's like, it's never foolproof, but I sensed as strongly as I had ever sensed in my life that he was speaking to me. God, I've just got to do what you're telling me to do. You know what happened for them is they walk through, they look around, and they said, I don't know, God. I don't think we can do it. Now, 2 of them want to go, and they will go. God's going to make sure they go. Even in late in life, they're going to go. They're going to make it. Joshua and Caleb, they're going to make it to the promised land. But the rest of them say, God, I don't think we can do it. I don't think we want to do it. And we're not going to do it. And God said, that's going to hurt you more than you ever imagined. I don't know what it is in your life right now. I was thinking through moments, big groups of people. Maybe yours is a hidden sin right now that God has been talking to you about, but you've just been delaying, not making decision, not taking action on something God's been whispering to your heart. It might be a big sin that people would talk about or something hidden, something to do with that this just isn't the right thing for you, but you've been pushing it off. God, I'll get to it when everything else calms down. When life is more simple, then I'll do that. It might be a hidden sin in your life. It might be a conversation you need to have with a loved one. Maybe it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend, a husband or a wife, a family member, and you need to have the conversation, but you've been delaying having the conversation, and God keeps just pushing you. Maybe he's not speaking audibly, but you sense your heart saying, that's just the right thing to do. That feels like what I'm supposed to do, and it's a reoccurring idea in your life. These are the moments we live in all around us. Some of it isn't always going into the promised land, and you think it's a big moment. I don't think they thought it was a big moment, actually. I think they thought, it's okay. This will lead to something else good. We'll just backtrack, and we'll rethink it. But God knew what you do in that moment is going to change the next moment, that's going to change the next moment, and the moment after, and all the rest of the moments in your life. Maybe it's a friendship that you have that's toxic, and you need to walk away from it. You can still love them from a distance. You can still pray for them, but it's just not good for your soul, and you need to kind of take a step back from that friendship because they're not bringing life to you, they're bringing death to you in your relationship with God. Maybe it's a big dream that God has been calling you to, and your heart beats for an issue or a need, and you think, well, one day life will settle down, and maybe if God's saying that you should wait, then you should wait, but otherwise you're supposed to take a step towards it. You're supposed to keep stepping towards whatever God has told you to do in whatever way you possibly can. Maybe it's a step of obedience that you've been delaying, and you've been negotiating, you've been trying to make trades with God, like they began to try to make trades with God. God just wants to say, today you need to walk through the moment and do what I'm telling you to do. Some of you, it's maybe a choice to believe. Maybe to say, you know what? I've been around church. I know what Christianity is about. I know the message of Jesus in general, but I've never made a decision to cross the line of faith and cross that threshold that's in front of me. I just want to declare to us today, let's be men and women who don't stay on the outside, be fence sitters. We're going to be men and women of God. We're going to say, we're going to do whatever God tells us to do. We're going to be people who walk through every door that he opens and stays behind every door that he closes. We're going to do what God is telling us to do as fast as we possibly can. By the way, the speed of your obedience matters. I wish it wasn't so. I wish I could delay it and do it, and it would be a little bit better. I could think about it, process it a little bit better. But the speed of your obedience does matter. In fact, there was a pastor some years ago, Leonard Ravenhill, that said, the opportunity of a lifetime must be seized within the lifetime of the opportunity. Isn't that fascinating? There's a ticking clock on every moment in your life. And they were at the moment, a threshold, where the clock was ticking, and God says, look, we'll take a little while. Let's go 40 days, go look around, come back, report, see that I do what I say I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a land that's flowing with milk. Go see that I fulfill my promises. They go around and look, and they're in that moment, but they say, we don't like the moment, and we'd like to delay the moment and think about it a little bit longer, and they end up missing the entirety of their moment. In fact, what's going to happen in the story is of all the people that go around and look for 40 days, God's going to say, you know what? For every day you took looking around the land, I'm going to give you 1 year of wandering in the desert. 40 days of looking around, I'm going to give you 40 years of wandering in the desert. In fact, that's what they said. They're at the moment. They come back from exploring. They're debating, and they say, you know what? We wish you would have just left us in Egypt to die. They said, we wish we could just die in the wilderness and not go in. God says, I don't want you to stay in Egypt, and I don't want you to die in the wilderness. But eventually, if you're not going to do what I'm telling you to do, that's exactly what's going to happen to you. And they end up there at the moment, and they miss their moment. I don't want to miss my moments. Do you want to miss your moment? You don't want to miss your moment. You want to step through whatever door God opens. You don't want to be reckless and just chasing all kinds of things. But when God speaks, you want to say, I'm going to be a person who does what God tells me to do. When you read it in the scriptures, something that leads you in a certain direction, says that's the kind of life you're supposed to live. That's how you're supposed to. I want to be the kind of person who goes forward and does what God tells me to do. If I'm in a conversation with my wife and we feel like this is what we're supposed to do next with our life and the next step for us, we pray about it, we sense clarity about it. We want to be the kind of people who go and do it no matter what the consequences might be, because we believe in a big God who's bigger than the giants that are in the land. He's bigger than the giants in the land. And that's what they miss. They're like, I don't know, they look too big. It looks too scary. And they end up stuck in a moment, stuck in the wilderness. And those 20 years and older never leave the wilderness. That would be a crushing result for the people that are here today and for me. I don't want to be left in the wilderness. And they looked at it and they said, they hear all the report, by the way, the story goes on, chapter 14, they hear the report, Moses comes back, explains everything, you're going to be stuck in the wilderness. They're like, oh, okay, it doesn't sound as good as we thought. All those things are like, okay, now we're ready. That's what happens at the end. They're like, now we're ready to go now. God's like, we missed the moment. I love you, you're still my people, but you missed the moment. They're like, we're going to go anyway. Moses is like, don't go, God is not with you now. You're trying to get ahead. You didn't listen to him the first time, and you're not listening to him the second time. Both times were wrong. Both times are disobedience. They say, we're going to go anyway. So they march out without Moses. It says without the Ark of the Covenant, meaning the presence of God is not leading them, not guiding them, not with them. They don't have the blessing of God, and they're going out into this promised land on their own strength, and they end up get defeated, and they have to go all the way back to the beginning, and God takes the door. And he closes the door. He says, I will be with you. I will be with you, but you're not going to make it in because I can't have my new people that I'm creating be filled with fear and disobedience. I'm creating a new people who live a different kind of life, who obey me when I speak to them. Every decision has a ripple effect. This will impact 40 years of people. Impacts where they live, their family lines, their whole destinies. They thought, it's just one moment, right? You ever think that in your own life? It's just one moment. Nobody sees, nobody knows. It's not impacting anybody, but it is impacting yourself and those around you. It impacts their family, and they get stuck on the other side of the moment. Sometimes one moment can change your entire life. Life's too short. When God speaks, life is too short to not walk through the door. And I want to say to us today, I want to say, let's be a people who are door walker throughers. That's the best I could come up with. We're going to be door walker throwers. God, you open the door. You open the door. I'm going to walk through the door. You open the door, I'm going to cross the threshold. God, if you open the door, I'm not going to sit on the fence back here and just wait it out and see how it goes. I'm going to let them go, and then I'll think about it. I'm going to say, God, I know speed of obedience matters. I'm going to be obedient to what you tell me to do. Sometimes, God, you know I'm going to have questions. I'm going to have concerns. I'm going to have worries. You know that, right? God's like, yeah, I know you're going to have all those things. But will you obey me and walk by faith even when you have the worries in your heart? If you will, then we can work with that. If you have questions but you keep moving forward, I can work with that. I think that's how God would speak to all of us. We say, Brad, I don't want to be someone who stays on the other side of the moment. I don't want to waste my life, and I don't want to live with regret. I can't do it all perfectly, but I can be one who lives with intentionality where I'm going to say, my steps, my walking is going to be by faith and not by sight. It's going to be by the leading of the Spirit of God rather than just my intellect or the opinions of the people around me. By the way, it says they spread a negative report. Sometimes when you follow God, people are like, I don't get it, doesn't make sense, doesn't sound possible, doesn't sound like a good thing, but you know in your heart what's true better than they know. You have to follow what's in your heart because it's between you and God what's happening. Say, I want to be one, and I want our church, I want Anthem Church, I want the city of Tulsa, I want the people of God around the world. What might happen if we always walked through the door? The world would change if we turned our delayed obedience into quick, resolved obedience. It would change our forever. That means we have to choose faith over fear. We have to choose obedience over delay. We have to choose trust over control. God, I want to be in control, but you decide what doors shut and what doors open. I don't get to decide that. You shut doors that I want open sometimes. Doesn't God ever do that? Shut a door you want open. And he opens doors you're just not so sure about at the beginning. The question is, will we just do what he's doing? Will we let him lead and us follow? I have to choose trust over control. You know, the simplicity of the gospel and simplicity of a relation with God, if you could get 2 words right in your relation with God, it would change your whole forever. It's something simple that we learned in nursery rhymes or songs as a kid, and that is just that I want to be someone who trusts and obeys. Trust and obey. I may not get anything else right, but I'm going to trust and I'm going to obey. I may not do everything perfectly. I may not know everything. I may not understand everything, but I'm going to be a person who trusts and obeys, and man, that'll get your life pointed in the right direction. God can take somebody who trusts and obeys, and he can get them to the promised land. He really doesn't need our help, by the way. They didn't know how to defeat armies, take down cities, fortify. They had never been an army. But God can do anything he wants if we'll just trust and obey. I was thinking this week, some of you follow me on Facebook, but I showed up. You know how memories show up in social media these days, like something you posted from years ago? I posted this week, 13 years ago this Sunday, God led Christine and I to step out in faith with a bunch of our best friends and plant a church in downtown Tulsa. It was scary. I had questions. I didn't know if anybody would show up. I didn't know if it would be like Christine and I together, and I would preach, and she would critique me afterwards. Wasn't quite sure how that was all going to go. But you got to trust and obey when God puts something in your heart. And what we knew was not that it would be successful, because God never would promise me that, no matter how many times I prayed it. God, will you show me if it'd be successful? If it's successful, I'll do it. I was like, I don't want to tell you. I just want you to trust and obey. He told me, second time in my life, he spoke to me, you can honor me most with your life by stepping out and planting this church. I was like, okay, if I can honor you, then that's got to be enough. 13 years ago, walking by faith, every decision has a ripple effect. Look at us here today. Here at Anthem Church exists. People have given their life to Christ all across our country as a result of things, decisions that I got to be some small part of and others got to be some small part of. There's a ripple effect every moment when we walk through the door and do what God has called us to do. As I close the message today, I want to say, let's not be fence sitters. Let's be, I don't think it's proper English, but let's be door walker throughers, okay? Let's be people who trust and obey even when we don't have all the answers in front of us, all the guarantees and assurances in front of us. Let's not be people who get stuck in moments, but walk through every moment that God opens the door. You know what that's going to require you to do? You're going to have to pray more about what decision to make. You're going to have to seek God more. You're going to have to seek godly counsel. You can't just do it in your flesh, make decisions that seem right to you in the moment, because those decisions will not lead you in the right direction. You're going to have to seek God and say, God, are you opening this door? Or are you closing this door? Are you in this or not in this? And then follow that the best that you know how. And walk through the door that's in front of you. In fact, as we end the service today, we're going to stand to our feet. I'll pray in just a moment. As we end the service today, I'm going to turn this door. We're going to set it in the middle of the stage. We're going to sing. We're going to have a time of response. When the service ends, when everything ends and people are leaving, some of you, this is for you. You're in a moment right now. You're in a decision right now. You know this is for you. You need to walk for. You know what you're supposed to do. You just have a sense like that's just the right thing. That's what I'm supposed to do next. We're going to set this door up here on the stage, and we just want to invite you, just a few of you, all of you, whatever it's on your heart, to come and walk through the door and tell God, I'm going to be a door walker througher. That's my most memorable point today. I'm going to be a godly man or a godly woman who follows you wherever you lead. I don't care what other people say. I just care what you say. I'm going to seek godly counsel. I'm going to seek your word. I'm going to get on my knees and pray. And when I start to feel clarity, I'm going to move forward no matter if I'm scared or not, no matter if everything's answered or not. Even if it's not what I want, I'm going to move forward. And some of you just need to come up and tell God, you just need to walk through the physicality of a door and say, that's just who I am. That's who I am. I don't know about anybody else, but this is who I am. I'm a man or a woman who's going to follow you wherever you lead me. And I think God can just take that simple prayer and ignite some incredible promised lands in your life. That's what God wants for us. Let's pray all across this room.